All right, everybody, welcome to let's see if I can remember the name of our seminar, UBS CFEM Data and Analytics seminar series, basically, Quant TV, let's call it. And we're delighted today to have Harrison Waldon, who is from UT Austin. And in fact, we share the same thesis advisors. So I'm welcoming my little academic brother here. So give him a good cheer. And I'm really happy to be hearing about this research because we have talked about it a few years ago, and Harrison was interested in reinforcement learning and algorithmic trading, and it looks like he has a really interesting talk for us regarding collusion of algorithms. And well, without further ado, Harrison, the floor is yours. And if anybody has any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I'll be sort of asking them as we go along. So thanks for joining us, Harrison.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sasha, for the invitation to speak today's seminar. Yeah, so today I'll be speaking about some recent work with Alvaro Cartea, Patrick Chang, and Jose Penalva on tools for studying algorithmic collusion. So the contents of today's talk will primarily be drawn from two working papers, the first two that are listed here. But for those interested, I should also point you to another working paper that my co-authors, which uses a lot of the techniques presented today to study the impact of price discretization on collusion. So I can send that one as well. Okay. So first, just to speak broadly about the prevalence of algorithmic pricing in the financial industry. So of course, it's very well known to this audience that the vast majority of trades in electronic markets are executed and driven by algorithms. So the particular forms of the algorithm used in practice are varied, but many algorithms used in practice rely on machine learning techniques like deep learning or NLP. And one particular class of algorithms, which has seen an increased attention, is that of reinforcement learning, or algorithms that learn trading strategies on their own via trial and error. So RL has seen practical success in deep hedging, as in the paper of Hans Buehler and co-authors, as well as in optimal execution. In academia, RL has been applied to all corners of the algorithmic trading literature, including trading, market making, and option pricing. So as noted by the AFM, so the Dutch financial regulator this year, trading algorithms which rely on end-to-end reinforcement learning are not so common in the financial industry. The firms that they surveyed, none of them used the end-to-end RL in their algorithms. However, many firms indicated that they want to incorporate RL-based trading algorithms in the near future, due to RL's well-known successes, such as achieving superhuman performance in complex board games like Go, or fast-paced video games like Dota and StarCraft. So while RL has seen empirical success in robotics and engineering, financial regulators have expressed concerns over the possibility of firms relying on entirely autonomous algorithmic trading and algorithmic decision-making. So indeed, regulators around the world envisage the risk of independent algorithms enabling tacit collusion, or inflated prices in the market achieved without explicit communication. So this concern is due in part to both empirical work, which shows that the adoption of algorithmic pricing strategies is often correlated with an increase of prices which can't be explained by other economic factors. So this has been noted kind of outside the financial industry, like this paper by Assad and co-authors looks at the retail gas market, gasoline market. So there's also a wealth of experimental evidence which demonstrates that certain reinforcement learning algorithms in certain scenarios can learn complex collusive strategies. So Calvano and co-authors listed here, for instance, shows that RL algorithms can learn to inflate prices in Bertrand and Cournot competition models, while Ramakant and his student show that deep reinforcement learning can learn to inflate spreads in a continuous time market-making setup. However, so a limitation of the existing work on this subject, and the work mentioned here, is that the study of the algorithms generally lacks a theoretical rigor. So they take a simulation approach by just simulating the algorithms and seeing what they learn. And while the simulations presented in the papers mentioned here are useful for illustrative purposes, they're hardly enough to justify, say, new regulation on the subject, because they're subject to a lot of kind of heuristics. You know, we don't know if the behavior exhibited by the algorithms are just artifacts of the particular experiment. Maybe the experimenter stopped the algorithms too soon. We don't know if what they learned is expected. So along these same lines, the AFM has expressed concern over RL explicitly due to its lack of explainability. So in particular, RL algorithms are generally understood in very simple scenarios in which a single agent interacts with a fixed but stochastic environment, so a Markov decision process. Markets, however, are multi-agent and non-stationary and increasingly driven by the decisions of ML algorithms. But very little is known about how these algorithms actually interact with one another. So this brings us to the main question main questions that drive our work, which is how can we understand the behavior of interacting reinforcement learning algorithms in financial settings? And second, can these algorithms provably learn to collude? So just to get us started with some of the formalism, I'll just review really quickly the basics of RL. So in RL, an agent seeks to optimally interact with an environment to maximize reward. So this image here is from Sutton and Bartow's classic reference on this subject, and shows the sequence of events. So an agent observes the state of the environment and picks an action to feed back into the environment. And this action will cause the environment to move to a subsequent state, and the combination of the action and the state will yield a reward for the agent. Formally, RL is the optimal control of a Markov decision process, which is given by the tuple, the S, A, U, P, and delta, where S is the set of states of the environment that the environment can be in. A is the set of actions available to the agent. UI denotes the immediate reward received by the agent, so which will depend on the present state of the environment and the realized action. And P is the transition function of the environmental dynamics. So it denotes the probability that the environment will move to a particular state, given that it was in some other state and we took some action. And delta denotes the discount factor of the agent. So how much they discount future wealth or future payoffs. Okay, so agents will choose actions according to a policy function, which may be random. So policies are denoted pi, and their functions from the set of states to the set of probability distributions over actions. So the goal of the agent is to learn an optimal policy pi star, such that pi star maximizes expected discounted payoff. So this is where the discount factor is coming in. So RL takes an algorithmic approach to this problem. So generally speaking, agents will parameterize their policies pi by a set of parameters theta, which we say will lie in some set G. So they'll pick parameters from some set G, and the thetas, the parameters, are updated successively by an algorithm, which in its most general form is written here. So we call f the learning rule. So f is a function that takes in old parameter values, the current state, current action, and possibly the subsequent state. So maybe we have a little bit of a delay in when we update our parameters. And it incorporates this information into a new set of parameters. The learning rate, this gamma n, is either exogenous or possibly endogenous in the case of adaptive regimes, and determines how much of the information should be incorporated. So the goal is then to find a set of parameters such that the parameterized policy approximates the optimal policy. And this is a very general way of presenting RL, and a wide class of algorithms can be understood this way. So one particular algorithm we'll focus on is asynchronous tabular Q-learning. So Q-learning at its core is very simple, but serves as the basis for a large number of more complex algorithms, such as the DQN algorithm, which is a very popular deep reinforcement learning algorithm, which achieves superhuman performance on learning how to play Atari games from pixel data. So we're focusing on the tabular version of this algorithm, which associates one parameter value, so given by the letter Q, to each state action pair. And the algorithm updates Q values in an asynchronous fashion. So that is, the Q values are only updated when a particular state action pair is realized. So this is compared with synchronous Q-learning, which studies synchronous Q-learning, which updates the Q values at every Q value in each step. And actually, this synchronicity and asynchronicity is pretty important in determining collusion, and some authors have studied synchronous Q-learning, which actually is more amenable to learning competitive outcomes than collusive outcomes. So with a given set of Q values, policies are parameterized by a softmax distribution with inverse exploration rate tau. So as tau gets lower, we explore more, and as tau gets higher, we exploit more. So this algorithm is very popular and underpins many algorithms in RL, and its behavior is well understood in certain settings. In particular, when there's just a single agent interacting with an environment whose transition function is fixed, then Q-learning will learn an optimal policy. However, as I said, markets are multi-agent and non-stationary, but still people use Q-learning anyway. So a lot of the academic work using RL and finance uses Q-learning. So the question becomes, so how does Q-learning behave in multi-agent settings? And more specifically, how does Q-learning behave when it interacts with other Q-learners?
So Harrison,
yeah.
Ask you a question. So, I mean, for a video game, it's pretty simple what the state would be and what the rewards would be, right? The state is the board, you know, all the pieces and where they could be on the board, and winning is clearly defined, or like winning a piece, it could win you 3 points or something like that. So I wonder, isn't maybe in finance, the devil is in the details of how do we define the state, or what, you know, are the actions buy, sell, hold, or are they go long, go short, or double down? I don't know, like you could buy a call option, or I don't know. So I wonder whether, you know, what are your thoughts generally on the state and the action space in finance?
Yeah, so we, in the examples that I'll cover in this talk, the state space, or the value of the state process is the vector of prices posted by other agents. So basically, I observe the current set of prices, and then I'm going to take I'm going to price conditional on that vector of prices, which is a pretty it's a simple way of conceiving of the state space. And I think definitely as you make the state space more complicated, you're going to have to do there's a lot more analysis that needs to occur. But one interesting thing in our work is that sometimes if you start conditioning on things that actually aren't relevant in the market, people can learn. I guess people can learn to sunspot trade. In our analysis shows that can prove that these algorithms will learn kind of sunspot trading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to answer the question of how Q-learning behaves when it interacts with other Q-learners, we'll need to define the multi-agent analog of a Markov decision process, which is a stochastic game. So a stochastic game is a repeated game whose payoffs may change period to period, depending on the state process. And the state process, now the evolution of the state process is controlled by the actions of all players in the game. So all agents are going to influence the flow of this process. So the notation is basically the same, although now we'll use bold letters to denote vectors across the number of agents. So bold S will denote the state of the state process. You know, in its most general form, this state process could be very large and incorporate public and private signals. Actions, payoffs, and the transition functions are defined similarly. So now where each quantity depends on the actions of all agents in the system. So the goal of each agent is then to maximize expected discounted wealth or expected discounted utility. But now the dynamics of the state process are determined by all agents. So this expectation is taken with respect to the policies of all agents, although the policies of the other agents are unknown to the agent I. So we're, instead of seeking, or rather solutions to games are not necessarily, we don't have a sense of optimality, but we have a sense of equilibrium. So we'll be kind of concerning ourselves with Nash equilibria of this game. So right, so because agents are going to be learning and adapting their policies through time, the true dynamics of the state process are going to be non-stationary, even though the transition function might be fixed. So the main example we'll run with throughout this talk is that of the prisoner's dilemma. So the prisoner's dilemma is a classic two-person static game. So just one interaction and nothing repeated. Each agent has two possible actions denoted C and D, standing for cooperate and defect in the classical presentation of this. And these actions yield the following symmetric payoff. So if both agents play C and C, then the payoff to each agent will be 1. Whereas if agent 1 plays C, but agent 2 plays D, then C will get 0. Agent 1 will get 0, but agent 2 will get 2. So we interpret the prisoner's dilemma as a stylized market. So definitely very stylized, and I'll talk about the limitations, although a lot of them are clear. So with two competing liquidity providers. So in our interpretation, each liquidity provider must quote a spread and can either quote wide or narrow. When both liquidity providers quote wide, there's mutual benefit and demand is shared equally among these higher prices. So this corresponds to each LP getting a payoff, which we just normalized to 1. However, quoting a narrow spread will undercut your opponent and take demand. So you'll get more of a payoff. You'll get the payoff of 2 if you undercut your opponent while they quote wide. So you'll get greater payoffs than the mutual wide quoting mutually wide. But both liquidity providers have this same incentive to undercut, which means that the unique equilibrium is for both liquidity providers to quote narrow. So we say that the equilibrium of mutually narrow spreads corresponds to the competitive quoted spread. So in the competitive sense, the spread should be narrow. So the prisoner's dilemma is classically a static game. So agents come together, take actions, and never interact again. Agents are myopic in that they're only concerned with immediate profits. And the notion of equilibrium also assumes that agents are infinitely rational. So there's some limitations to the static model. But to make the model a little bit more realistic, we consider a repeated prisoner's dilemma. So agents are going to play this game over and over again. And we're interested in algorithms learning to play this game while other players use algorithms as well. So to frame prisoner's dilemma as a stochastic game, we need to give some notion of state to the game. So we'll consider the case, as I said, the case of one period perfect monitoring. So this is the state process of a given period. The state value of a given period is the vector of realized actions from the previous period. So one can think of the two competing liquidity providers, each choosing a pricing policy, which is conditional on what the opponent just did in the previous trading period. So yeah, just to speak briefly about the limitations of prisoner's dilemma as a model for market interaction. So of course, this is definitely a toy model, and prices should have an intertemporal effect on demand, which should be incorporated into the dynamics of the state process. Here we only consider the state process to be the vector of prior realized prices. But really, the state should probably incorporate more information and at a longer time horizon, longer time scale than just the previous action profile, as well as exogenous shocks to the system. And we abstract away from this. And also, of course, time plays an important role in one's pricing strategy. But we just look at the time at which a trade takes place. So while the repeated prisoner's dilemma is pretty simple, we do think it captures an important kernel of the repeated interaction between market participants, which is already much more general than a lot of literature on algorithmic collusion, which a lot of this literature considers just static games. And also the tools that we present here are much more general and cover more general scenarios that can address these limitations. And we forgo a treatment of it explicitly, mainly because of the difficulty of visualizing stochastic games, and as things get very high dimensional, it gets very hard to visualize them. Okay, so like for each agent, we'll use an algorithm to learn a parameterized policy. And our goal is to understand the behavior of these algorithms interacting with each other. And to do so, we'll analyze the evolution of policies through the evolution of parameters. And direct analysis of discrete time algorithms is difficult because you're having to deal with the randomness of a non-stationary state process. So instead, we pass to a continuous time limit of the system. So we use the ODE method from stochastic approximation, which I'll describe momentarily. And so what we do is we derive an ODE, a system of ODEs, which approximates the evolution of parameters. And the system we arrive at we call it the algorithmic learning equations, which is in the our first paper from last year on this subject. So the goal is to arrive at an ODE, which approximates the evolution of parameters. So classical stochastic approximation would look at the ODE whose vector field is just the expected update of the learning rule, where you take the expectation of the state process. And if the state process is simple, maybe the state process is just the realization of IID random variables, then this would be easy. And you'd have that the ODE would really just be the expected evolution of your algorithm. However, in our setting, S is the evolution of this non-stationary process whose dynamics are changing according to the learning dynamics of all the agents. So what we do is we derive an approximate expectation. And so to accomplish this, we consider the hypothetical evolution of the game with parameters fixed. So this is what we define here, this S theta. So S theta, when you fix theta, is a true Markov chain whose transition dynamics are given exactly by equation 9. So we have the transition function, and then we just multiply by the probability of taking by taking the any vector of actions. So if this hypothetical evolution of the state process S theta is ergodic, then there exists a unique stationary distribution on states, which is given by the long run average frequency of visiting a certain state. This is the true state process isn't going to be stationary, as we've said, but for fixed beliefs, or when learning stops, this hypothetical evolution can be ergodic. And so one also has that this stationary distribution, when it exists, is Lipschitz continuous in theta when the policies are Lipschitz continuous as well. And that'll be important in a moment. Okay, so to arrive at a set of equations, we first condition the learning rule with respect to the stationary distribution induced by fixed parameters. So this gamma theta of S. And then we take expectations there. So we take this conditional expectation with respect to the stationary distribution, and then we build from there. Yes, so what we end up with is a system of ODEs written here, which we call the algorithmic learning equations. And the vector field might look foreboding, but it's really just, yes, conditional expectation with respect to stationary distribution, and then expectation with respect to policies.
Harrison, we've got a question from the audience. Someone's asking, do we assume that all agents have the same parametrized policies?
So no, in this general form, we don't. Here we'll assume that each agent parameterizes policies with this softmax distribution over Q values. And this choice of softmax distribution is very common in RL literature, which is why we do it. So we think that each agent using a common parameterization is not too limiting an assumption. So under the following conditions, the evolution of the ODE will approximate the evolution of the algorithms. So just to speak briefly about these conditions, condition A1 ensures that the learning rate is non-degenerate. So we can't have that the learning rate decreases to 0 so fast such that the algorithm stops learning just because the learning rate is 0 or goes to 0 too quickly. The proof of approximation also relies on compactness. We'll need that the parameters all stay in a compact convex set, I should say the example that we'll consider of Q-learning, we show that Q-learning under the softmax action selection satisfies all of these properties. So we need that parameters stay in a compact set, and in order to define the stationary distribution, we need that the state process is an ergodic Markov chain with a single recurrent class for every possible vector of parameters theta. So for all the parameters theta in our set of parameters, the state process needs to be ergodic. We also need that the policies are Lipschitz continuous in parameters, and that the learning rule is Lipschitz continuous in parameters as well. So under these conditions, the evolution of the algorithms can be approximated by the evolution of the ODE in the following sense. So
Harrison, another quick question, I think, about the previous slide.
Sure.
Will there be a pattern for parameter A action of agents across different states? Or will values of parameter A be random? Basically, will the behavior of agents be predictable?
So the ODE is a deterministic system. So in that sense, we've killed all the randomness when we look at the system of ODEs. And how we approach studying these algorithms is we look at the evolution of the ODEs to describe where the algorithms will tend towards. There's still stochasticity in the algorithms, but I think this next slide will be helpful because it describes in what sense the equations approximate this evolution. So our theorem 1 given here is that under an appropriate time scaling, so if we scale time with Tn equaling the sum of learning rates up to time n, up to period n, then the algorithm will be close to solutions of the ODE for any finite time horizon capital T with arbitrarily high probability, provided that the learning rate is small enough. So we assume that the learning rate was non-increasing, so all values of the learning rate are bounded by its first value. So the probability that the algorithm will be close to the solution can be made arbitrarily high if we take the learning rate small enough. So next, if the learning rate decays fast enough, but not too fast, so we have we still have that the first moment of the learning rates is infinite, but the 1 plus epsilon moment is finite of the learning rates, then the ODE actually approximates the asymptotic behavior of the algorithm as well, in that the algorithm will converge to locally asymptotically stable solutions almost surely under some restrictions. So we need that the behavior of will have this asymptotic approximation when the dynamics of the ODE are well behaved. So this first theorem just says that when the learning rate is small enough, we have a finite time approximation. And theorem 2 says that if the learning rate will decrease to 0 fast enough, then we can have an asymptotic approximation as well. Yes. Okay. So as a proof of concept, to validate these equations, to show that there are indeed good approximations of the behavior of the algorithms, let's first consider repeated prisoner's dilemma, but agents don't actually condition on the previous action profile. So they just learn one policy and they use that same policy every period. They're kind of a dumb algorithm. They don't remember anything. And we'll use Q-learning. with the same softmax action selection, and it can be very easily shown that Q-Learning satisfies all the conditions necessary for the ALEs to approximate their evolution. So they satisfy condition A, which was given before, and the state process condition, the one that says that the state process is ergodic for any beliefs, is satisfied immediately because there's only one state. The state doesn't change. So what we have here is our plot of the actual algorithm. So recall that the ALEs approximate the finite time evolution of the algorithms, but only when the learning rate is small. So one question is, how small does the learning rate need to be? So we've simulated here trajectories of the learning algorithm with a large learning rate. So the horizontal axis corresponds to the probability of agent 1 quoting wide, and the vertical axis is the probability of agent 2 quoting wide. So we started the algorithm here at these points, and it ran, and in these two scenarios, we ran up to the top right corner, which corresponds to both agents quoting wide spreads with probability 1 or near 1. And the bottom left corner corresponds to the equilibrium spread. So the Nash equilibrium. So the solid lines here, and the learning rate here for this algorithm is somewhat large. So I think we took this to be 0.01, which is not entirely unrealistic for an algorithm to use a learning rate of 0.01 in practice. The solid lines here represent trajectories of the learning algorithms with a small learning rate. So we started from the same position, just ran the algorithms with smaller learning rate. I think this was 10 to the -4, I think. So these are again trajectories of the algorithm itself.
So they're playing something like the prisoner's dilemma, but with this quote wide or quote tight, and basically, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So the space is super small, right? It's just two states per, but the complication is that there's several agents, or that they're competing.
Yeah. So here we're just considering 2 agents, and in the numerical examples that will follow, we'll still consider 2 agents, but we'll look at when we'll enlarge the state space so that each agent will actually be conditioning on the vector of actions that were taken in the previous period. So the gray lines here represent a field plot of the ODEs. So you see, they are a pretty excellent approximation of the algorithm with small learning rates, and the approximation doesn't break down too poorly as the learning rate grows. So we end up going to the same place. So moreover, the ALEs are a way of analyzing kind of the probability that one will end up at a collusive outcome, because we can analyze the basin of attraction of this absorbing point here. And the basin of attraction for this scenario is quite large. So there are a lot of initial conditions, a lot of initial parameters will lead you to the perpetual collusive point. I mean, more than 50% of initial conditions will lead you there. Okay, so now we'll give each agent the ability to condition her spreads on the spreads of her opponent from the previous period. So the setup is similar to before, but now we consider state-dependent Q-Learning. So this algorithm can also be shown to satisfy the conditions necessary for to be approximated by the ALEs. The main condition which needs to be shown is that the state process is ergodic for any choice of Q values. But this is because the Q values stay bounded, stay in a bounded regime because the rewards are finite. So with Q values bounded, the softmax will be bounded away from 0 as well. So that means, yeah.
Can I ask you a question about the previous simulation? That we have a question from the audience.
Yep.
They ask, what's the source of noise in these simulations?
The source of noise here is in the rougher lines here, there's randomness in the policy selection. So this is right. So there's more randomness in the action selection. So there's going to be more randomness in what the agents learn. Does that make sense?
Is it because they're mixed strategies, right? So basically,
yes.
These agents keep flipping a coin to decide whether they're wide or tight, right?
Exactly. Yes. Okay, so because the state process is this vector of previously realized actions, and the probability of playing any action is bounded away from 0, the state process is going to be ergodic because any vector of actions has a positive probability of being realized in any period. That probability might be very, very small, but it's at least bounded away from 0. So we do have that the state process is ergodic. So that the ALEs that we end up with are similar to the ones before, just with the addition of this scaling factor given by the stationary distribution for fixed Q values. Okay, so we'll show that Q-learning learns to collude, but now that we have a more complicated algorithm that's going to condition on past prices, we can actually be a little bit more precise about what we mean by collusion. So in economics, collusion isn't just observing inflated prices, because you can attain inflated or super competitive prices without collusion. I can just decide one day that I want to inflate my prices, and maybe my opponent wants to do the same. The inflated prices in the collusive regime must be enforced by what's called a reward punishment scheme. So agents reward each other, reward those who stick to the inflated price by continuing to play the inflated price, and those who undercut are punished by deviation to the competitive price. So to examine the frequency with which a set of policies will induce the collusive outcome, so how often do we actually see the collusive outcome? We'll look at the stationary distribution of the two policies at the mutually collusive outcome. And then we interpret the components of each agent's policies in terms of punishment. So the probability that one is going to quote narrow, given that one's opponent quoted narrow, can give us a sense of the strength at which agent 1 is going to punish its opponent for deviating. And if both agents have quoted narrow, we can think of this as the length of punishment. So how long do I want to continue playing quoting narrow, given that we're in this state of punishment? And the probability of playing quoting wide, given that both agents have quoted wide, is the probability of continuing cooperation. Okay, so here we've plotted the algorithmic learning equations for state-dependent Q-learning for a range of initial conditions until the trajectories numerically converge. So the horizontal axis here, I know it's very small. I can zoom in a little bit if that helps. The horizontal axis is the probability of undercutting, given that your opponent has undercut. And the vertical axis corresponds to the probability that you continue to play the competitive price, given that both agents quote competitively. And so the left-hand panel shows the initial alpha collusion probability, so the initial stationary distribution of the mutually collusive outcome, the relative frequency that initial policies will play the collusive spread. And in the rightmost panels, we plot the collusion probability at convergence. And the middle panels just plot the difference between values at convergence and initial values. So as we see, so for every initial condition in this range, the agents will learn to play the collusive spreads nearly 100% of the time. Note too that agents need not start with high collusion probabilities. So around here, the relative frequency of observing collusive prices is actually only around 0.3. So you'd only observe collusive prices about 30% of the time. And the red squares here correspond to competing, playing the competitive spread nearly 100% of the time. So the perpetual collusion, I should also say that we've assumed a lot of symmetry in these plots here. In the previous plots, we didn't assume symmetry, but here, just for ease of visualization, we've assumed some symmetry. But we have plotted and investigated this when we break the symmetry, so we don't assume that each agent starts with the same policy. It's just a bit more difficult to visualize, but we still get the same. We still get similar behavior. So a very large basin of attraction of collusive of the collusive outcome. But collusive and competitive outcomes are not the only outcomes that we observe. So these yellow colored squares here correspond to some kind of unexpected behavior. The agents here actually learn to play the collusive outcome 50% of the time. And in fact, players will learn to cycle between the mutually collusive and mutually competitive outcome. So they'll just flip-flop back and forth from both wide to both narrow. So as we said before, for behavior to be considered collusive, recall agents need to learn a reward punishment mechanism. And so we do see that behavior exhibited by Q learners. The middle and right panels here describe the difference in immediate punishment probability and the difference in length of punishment probability. So respectively, between convergence time and initial time. So notice that when Q learning begins in this region here, the difference, or there's a positive gain in the strength of punishment and in the length of punishment. So here we see that the probability of quoting a narrow spread, given that your opponent has defected, grows, and same in this case. So in the setting, we can say that Q learning learned collusive behavior. But it is quite delicate because for many of these initial conditions, Q learning didn't learn to increase the strength of punishment. Okay, so to summarize these results, we propose the algorithmic learning equations, which are a system of ODEs that approximate the finite time and asymptotic behavior of learning algorithms in stochastic games. The methodology we use to arrive at this is stochastic approximation, and we provide minimally restrictive sufficient conditions that allow for the behavior of a wide class of state-dependent reinforcement learning algorithms to be approximated. And we implement the ALEs numerically for a popular reinforcement learning algorithm, Q-Learning, and demonstrate this algorithm can learn to collude. So some limitations of this work is that there are some numerical difficulties in that in some of these plots, calculating the stationary distribution is actually quite sensitive to machine precision. So in a lot of these cases, the stationary distribution we calculate is actually 1. So the computer spits out 1 when theoretically it should be bounded away from 1 and bounded away from 0. But this is because, you know, to calculate the stationary distribution, you need to take a lot of matrix products, and you need to be careful about how you do so. We also don't have theoretical guarantees. So we don't have that. We don't have. So sorry here. To guarantee that the asymptotic behavior of the equations approximates the asymptotic behavior of the algorithm, we need to show that the dynamics of the ODE are well behaved, and this amounts to showing existence of a Lyapunov function. And for the Q-Learning ODE, this is pretty difficult because of you know, you need to deal with this the stationary distribution here, so you need to differentiate through it, which is quite difficult. So I know I'm running a bit short on time. Sorry. Oops. So to address the issues here, we in our second paper we introduce a new algorithm which we call state-dependent smooth fictitious play, which is in a generalization of classical fictitious play, which is a more game theoretic algorithm which learns stage game or static game Nash equilibria through repeated interaction. So it's a particularly simple algorithm. Fictitious play is basically the algorithm assumes that all agents in the system play according to stationary policies, and the beliefs of those strategies are formed via the empirical frequency of play. So say my opponent plays action A twice and action B twice, then in the 5th period, I'll assume that he'll play action A with a 50% probability and B with a 50% probability. And then with these beliefs, I'll myopically pick a best response. And under particularly strict conditions, fictitious play will converge to an equilibrium behavior. So you can actually theoretically prove that fictitious play will converge to an equilibrium. And this is a very old algorithm. I think fictitious play was introduced in the 50s. There are some issues with it. So in the 90s, basically, if you know, because the learning rule is quite strict and there's no, it's completely deterministic, you can take advantage of your opponent. So you say, I know my opponent is going to learn in this way. That means I can play in this other way. I can play in a way that's conscious of that, which is going to guide my opponent into a certain direction. So to get around that, Fudenberg and Krebs and Levine introduced smooth fictitious play, which basically adds some randomness into the system. Instead of taking a true best response, they'll take a smooth best response. So basically, as we'll see, this is really just taking actions according to a soft max distribution, which is what we considered before. So our algorithm here, and I think, yeah, I'll just describe the algorithm really quick, and then we can kind of move on to questions. So our algorithm here we call state-dependent smooth fictitious play. It's an extension of fictitious play to stochastic games. Each player is assumed to have full knowledge of their own payoffs, but not necessarily the payoffs of other agents. Each agent assumes that all agents play according to a stationary state-dependent strategy, and beliefs about the strategies are given by the empirical frequency of play, which is state-dependent as well. So for each state of the game, each agent keeps a running frequency of each action played. Beliefs are updated then by equation 21 here. So we just update by the empirical frequency, but we can rewrite the algorithm in a nice iterative form, which is here. So play from this algorithm evolves in the following way. Given a belief, agents compute their expected discounted utility for all states and actions, assuming assuming that all agents will act according to these believed strategies. So they compute their expected discounted utility, and then sample actions with respect to a softmax distribution over these action values. So we call this the action value. So we take an action through this softmax distribution or logit choice function, and we repeat this process infinitely. So the main result is that we can approximate this algorithm by a continuous time system using the algorithmic learning equations, and we can analyze that system of equations. We can prove existence of a Lyapunov function and show that rest points of that system of ordinary differential equations will actually contain collusive strategies. So we guarantee that this algorithm, smooth fictitious play, will converge to rest points of the continuous time system, and rest points of the continuous time system may be collusive. So this algorithm has a non-zero probability of truly converging to collusive strategies. And here's a quick plot of how the basin of attraction of the collusive strategy grows as agents become more patient. So this algorithm depends crucially on the discount factor. As the discount factor grows, and as agents are more and more patient, the probability of learning the true collusive outcome, the collusive strategy, will grow. So I think I'll cut it here, and if people want, I can go back and talk about things more. But the key takeaway is that completely decentralized algorithms can indeed learn collusive strategies. So we saw this numerically with Q-Learning, and well, it was rather quick. This algorithm, smooth fictitious play, state-dependent smooth fictitious play, can provably learn collusive strategies as well. So further directions to take this research, definitely, we want to consider a more realistic market dynamic. So considering stochastic games where the state process is going to track demand, and prices will have an intertemporal effect on demand. And of course, we can consider more complex algorithms. So we want to study deep RL algorithms rigorously and theoretically, and see which equilibria and which prices these algorithms can learn theoretically. And the algorithmic learning equations that I've presented here can be applied in both of these directions. So this is definitely something that we will be doing. And finally, there's definitely, I've spoken about the possibilities of algorithmic collusion, but I haven't said anything about collusion detection, which is definitely a very interesting problem and a very difficult problem. And we're looking into ways about how to actually measure collusion. If you're just observing behavior in the market, can you determine whether the behavior is collusive or not? Yeah, so I'll cut it there. Thank you all very much for attending and listening, and I'd love to take your questions.
Okay, maybe I'll start.
Yeah.
If other questions pop up, feel free to put them in the Q&A. I guess you're going to find, about this future work, if two agents have a behavior that's correlated, does that mean they're colluding, or does it just mean they are both doing a rational, self-preserving strategy?
Yeah, it's a really tough question because the collusive strategies here, this is the particular set of collusive strategies that SFP, our algorithm, can learn, which is basically take a set of collusive prices. If every agent quotes those prices, I'll continue to quote those prices. But if anyone deviates, then I'm just going to go to the competitive price. These strategies are a true equilibrium of the game. So in some sense, they are a rational outcome. But our understanding of collusion is generally with respect to the static game. So the equilibrium of the static game is to quote the narrow spreads, but the static game is a really poor reflection of the reality of the dynamic interaction between people. So I think definitely part of this work and I think the legal work, if this is to be regulated, I think there needs to be a kind of a holistic treatment of what equilibrium behavior do we want to consider as collusive, because this is rational in some sense. And we see that rational algorithms can arrive at this behavior without communicating with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any other questions. So Harrison, thanks again for a great talk. Everybody else, we're done with the spring semester series. We look forward to seeing you in the fall. And yeah, have a great summer, everybody.